welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I want to share some tips and advice I have for test day. So if this is something you're interested in, please keep watching. Also, please don't forget to like the video if you liked it, as well as subscribe for more content like this. Now let's get into it. So on test day, when you get to the Prometric Center and you've signed in and everything, they're going to provide you with 2 pieces of paper, and the first thing I want to share is what I actually wrote down on my piece of paper before I started my exam. And I want to point out that I only wrote down like one side of a sheet of paper, and I kept the rest blank for if I needed to write something down or solve a problem. And I recommend also, if you can, to write down as much as you want for testing on one side of a sheet of paper. If you see me looking down, that's just me looking at my notes, but you'll see a screenshot of what I'm sharing over here. I want to point out that majority of what I wrote down on my piece of paper were the different biostatistics formulas, as well as other formulas that we should know, such as Hardy-Weinberg. So the first thing I want to go over that I put on my sheet of paper for test day is the chart, which you should be able to write out, where it shows the reality versus the test. And I filled it in with true positive, false negative, and true negative. And I also went ahead and put in sensitivity and specificity, as well as positive predictive value and negative predictive value. So I filled in this chart. I put in what was I also put reality and test or exposure, whichever one the question asks, so that whenever I did have a question and I was under the time pressure, I could easily fill it in and solve for either, for example, negative predictive value, positive predictive value, or sensitivity. This chart is really important because it's the basics, right? You want to be able to make this chart and come up with it and solve for whatever the question is asking. So I highly recommend having this already written down, so whenever the question does come, it's just a matter of plugging it in and solving for whatever they're asking. And I also had odds ratio as well as relative risk written down, and what study we would see odds ratio in versus relative risk. That's really important to know as well. I also want to specify that it's really important to know the definition of these terms. For example, if they ask that this person has tested positive for this disease, but how likely is it that they actually have the disease? You want to know that they're asking for what is the positive predictive value. I did also write down the formula for attributable risk as well as absolute risk reduction. And the reason I memorized AR and ARR is because you need that value to solve for number needed to treat and number needed to harm. So I also had those formulas on my sheet of paper as well. And then I had 2 more things from biostats on my sheet. The other thing I had on there was the standard deviation graph, so I could easily see visually. So when I see a graph, I could easily solve the problem. And I went ahead and drew out the statistical distribution, the standard deviation graph, and I went ahead and labeled where is 68%, 95%, and 99.7%. And the last thing from biostats that I wrote down was the statistical hypothesis chart. So that's the null hypothesis versus the alternate hypothesis. And this is important because that chart can help you solve for alpha and beta, as well as the power. And then also knowing what is a type 1 error versus type 2 error. All these points are really important. Since biostatistics is a topic that I'm not super confident in, I took my time to memorize these formulas and these concepts, and I practiced writing down all these formulas that I'm showing on the screenshot on the practice exams I took throughout my dedicated. So every time I took an NBME, I practiced writing it down. So my ring light stopped working midway through the video. I tried fixing it, but I apologize for the difference in lighting. I'm gonna try to finish this video with the natural sunlight that's coming in. Going on with what I wrote on my piece of paper on test day. So I also went ahead and I wrote down the translocations that are really important to know. For example, Burkitt lymphoma being an 814 translocation. And I also wrote down c-MYC, knowing that it's associated with Burkitt's lymphoma. And the other thing I wrote down were the multiple endocrine neoplasias. So what you find in MEN1 versus MEN2A and MEN2B. And I wrote these down because even though I knew them, sometimes I would get myself confused or second guess whenever a question about these topics came up. So having it already written down on my piece of paper makes it like an easy reference to look at whenever a question about these topics does pop up, and I'll know exactly that, you know, my thought process was correct, and I could easily pick the right answer. Because whenever I am under that time crunch and I want to make sure that I'm picking the correct answer, I find myself sometimes second guessing. So having that information on my sheet makes me more confident whenever I pick my answer. So yeah, that was what I had on my sheet for test day. And of course, you can add or put on whatever you feel like. I highly suggest having formulas such as the biostats formulas on hand, ready to go, because it'll just make solving that problem a whole lot easier, and I find it to be less stressful. So moving on from that, I also want to share that I do wear glasses as well. And since I wanted to wear glasses on my exam day, I had to look for a mask that wouldn't fog up my glasses. Another tip I want to point out is that if you plan to wear glasses on your exam day, practice taking your practice exams during your dedicated with a mask on, because you don't want anything on test day to feel new to you. So you want to get used to everything that could possibly happen on test day. And since we are still in this pandemic and masks are still required in certain areas, it's always best to get used to wearing a mask, especially for this long exam. So I would highly recommend, whenever you take a practice exam or practice NBME or the UWorld self-assessments, wear it with a mask and glasses as you would on exam day. So this is what I did, and I had a couple of masks that I was trying out. The first one is like this regular fabric mask. I found this okay to wear for a short term with glasses, and then I also tried this mask as well. This was my backup mask for my exam day. So I had this just in case for some reason my other masks weren't working. This one is okay with glasses as well. So it definitely took me a while to find a mask that I could wear on test day along with my glasses, but I found a really good one on Etsy, and it's this cloth fabric, and they come with 2 straps. And I found these masks really nice. My glasses didn't fog up at all. They also came with these 2 bendable wires, so it made it like an extra strong hold around the nose, so not as much fog would come up when you're wearing glasses. And then you just stick it in this little slot, and when you wear them, it's like a snug and tight fit, so there's barely any fog that comes up when you're wearing glasses. And then they have the second lining on the outside for an even more secure fit around the nose. And I really like these because the cloth made it really comfortable. It wasn't like itchy or scratchy. It was very comfortable fit for me. So the main thing I wanted to share in this video again was what I wrote on my sheet of paper for test day, and the advice I have regarding wearing masks for test day, especially if you're someone who wears glasses. So I highly recommend getting used to wearing a mask while taking your practice exams, because again, step 1 is a really long exam, so you want to make sure that you're comfortable during this exam. You're used to everything in your surroundings, what you're wearing, for example, the mask. While this pandemic is going on, that's how these exams are going to be now, so it's best to get used to it right now while you're in your dedicated. Also, I want to add that on test day, try your best to go with the flow. So if you feel like taking a break, take a break. And the reason I say this is if you push yourself to continue doing block after block after block, you're gonna get exhausted and tired out. So if you feel like you need to take a break, take a break. I took a break between each block, and that's not how I took my practice exams. My practice exams were 2 blocks back to back, a 10-minute break, and then 2 blocks back to back. And then I just split up the rest of my break time between the rest of my blocks. But I highly suggest, if you feel like you need to take a break, because you want to have the same energy and momentum throughout your exam, not just in the beginning, but throughout the exam. So listen to your body, and if you feel like you need to take a break, take that break. That's the best advice I can give. Just go with the flow, do what feels right to you, and don't force yourself to keep doing block after block after block. Because you gotta remember, step 1 is a marathon, not a race. Okay, so this concludes my video on my step 1 tips and advice. I hope you guys found this video helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next one.